on this episode of Edge of the Web.
We live in this world full of best practices and conventional wisdom and hacks and cheats and tips and tricks and gurus and technological change. And so finding best practices is not the goal. Finding what works best for you is, and we don't talk enough about how to do that, but that's what matters, right? There's a difference between a best practice or a trend or a precedent and what works best for you, your audience, and your resources, your context right now.
Your weekly digital marketing trends with industry trend-setting guests. You're listening and watching Edge of the Web. Winners of Best Podcast from the Content Marketing Institute for 2017. Hear and see more at edgeofthewebradio.com. Now, alongside Tom Broadbeck, here's your host, Aaron Sparks.
Edgers, I think this is a good concept that we need to get out there into the general public, right? If you're listening to Edge of the Web, you are an edger. Now, that's probably a wrong thought because they're going to be compared with like gardening utensils. No? I brought the thing to a screeching halt and I haven't even started. Hey, every week we're beginning the cutting edge information on digital marketing over here at Edge Media Studios located in downtown Indianapolis, Indiana. You need to check out all the shows over at edgeofthewebradio.com. We're interviewing guests from around the planet that are top level influencers and marketers in the digital marketing space. I'm proud to be able to bring that to you every week. We're powered by Site Strategics, our company, focused on the agile marketing method. And if you're interested in what that has to do with your success, well, jump on board over to sitestrategics.com. That's SITE, strategics.com. Have a conversation with us. We might be able to unpack some tactics that will bring you digital marketing success. But if you don't know what they are, you won't be able to jump in there. So come on over to the site. I'm your host, Aaron Sparks. I'm owner and CEO of Site Strategics. The reason why we do this show is a number of different reasons, but the main reason is, Tom, what is the main reason?
To continue our education and provide value for our listeners and help them to continue their learning and their education in this crazy digital marketing world.
I don't buy it. I think it's just because we're making money. We're trying to make money.
That's point two.
Okay. This is Tom Broadbeck over here. To my left, he's the director of digital media over here at Site Strategics.
Hello.
Hello, and we certainly appreciate all the live stream guests that are coming on the show. Live stream, what do you call them? Streamers? They're edge streamers.
Apparently, they're edgers.
They are edgers. So we certainly, if you're a podcast listener, we would love for you to jump onto the live stream that we're broadcasting every Thursday at 3 p.m. And if you have any questions for our guests, we'll certainly scoop them up and deliver them. But if you're just a podcaster, not a problem. We love you as an audience. You can always check our shows out around Tuesday of each week that we drop the iTunes and the Google Plays and the Stitchers. So if we're not where you are, how in the world are we listening to this? But if you want us to be on your top platform for podcasting, let us know and we'll certainly get it there. I would like to introduce a return guest on our show. We actually have a favorite of ours, right? One of the top guests that have actually been on our show in the recent days, Jay Acunzo. Jay, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. You say that to all the guests, I'm sure.
No, just the ones that are unfortunately Marvel supporters, and it's I just need to stroke your ego, maybe not because Marvel's completely trouncing DC right now. I'll just throw that out there, so we know where everybody stands.
Edger brings them. My first job ever was doing hardwood floors for my friend's father's company. And Edger is the little machine with a circular piece of sandpaper that you go around the edge of a hardwood floor and strip off all the previous coats.
So we're getting into the utility.
That's what I thought of.
Yeah, I thought about the grass. The sidewalk edger.
Sidewalk edger.
I'm just going to pull back on that entire reference because it's probably not going to go well. It hasn't gone well so far this show. So Jay is coming out of New York. Jay, it's great to be able to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome. Every show we start off with some top-of-mind digital marketing news. You want to dive into that real quick?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Well, let's take you through the latest digital marketing news.
I was very excited to start my reportings.
This week's trending topics.
we're starting off with a with gangbuster production values here. Over at Search Engine Journal from Matt Southern, Instagram lets users share audio from SoundCloud to stories. Tom, they're connecting the dots over there. Why don't you connect a few dots here for us?
Yeah, so Instagram's now offering, like you said, the SoundCloud integration. When you're in the SoundCloud app on your phone, there should be within the share functionality of your SoundCloud app, there is a straight to Instagram Stories feature. So they are the only other app that has that feature, at least for the audio side of things. Spotify is the other one. So this could be, the article talked about how it could be good for marketers and podcasters to utilize, or for fans to be able to utilize this functionality. So it could be a great tool for marketers and podcasters to. Well, we don't get a lot of listens from our SoundCloud. I was looking at our stats, but obviously we're one of many, so I'm sure others get more from their SoundCloud, especially ones that actually use that as their specific host. So it could be a great functionality for when we continue to see all these numbers about how podcast numbers are growing, and this could just help even more.
We did another story here several weeks back regarding Twitter and how they were actually leveraging a Twitter podcast production or
live audio,
right?
Yeah.
So you're seeing audio make its way into these already well utilized platforms, right?
Yeah,
so,
yeah. I mean, if you're streaming and you're out and about and you're right in a big city and you're riding on a train, audio is a lot. It doesn't use as much data as a video would. So a lot of people tend to use the audio functionality. So
yeah, absolutely. So Jay, what do you think about making its way into stories over on Instagram?
So if I were to tell you guys that Home Depot now carries a new type of tool, your response would be, okay, maybe someday I'll buy it.
Possibly an edger.
Right? Like possibly never. Like it depends on what you're trying to build.
Right.
And when we in marketing discuss updates to a popular platform like an Instagram, I think our tendency is to sort of panic read the news. And it doesn't matter what the feature is. It doesn't matter what others say you have to do. What matters is you figure out what works best for you. So in this case, that's great. Instagram added a new tool. Home Depot added a new tool. What are you trying to build? Maybe it affects you, maybe it doesn't. So to me, honestly, it seems kind of insignificant. We got to stop with all these because it's Instagram, because it's Facebook, because it's LinkedIn, and they did this new thing. Oh my God, what does that mean for us? We need to be more proactive than reactive. We have to go back into our companies, figure out what it is that we're trying to do. Who are our customers? What do we aspire to build here? And then we can go out in this age of information and technology and in an on-demand way, tap any of these features if and only if it actually makes sense for us.
It's kind of like scoping the product before you actually go find out if there's tools to be able to make the product, as opposed to building your entire company around a tool set that you don't even know how to utilize yet. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yeah, we marketers, it's a good thing we do digital marketing, because if you transported us back to colonial times, I swear to God, everybody here would think, oh, so the cart goes before the horse? No, you put a strategy first, then the tactics.
Oh, I don't know. It's not nearly as much fun to run around with our hair on fire. You know? Anyway, well, you're absolutely right, sir. Is that you've got to look at what you're trying to do and what type of story you're trying to tell, and does your audience actually want to hear from you as opposed to watch you or read what you're saying, right? So you got to understand the medium too.
Right, and I would add one more thing in a little bit less of a sarcastic tone, which is difficult for me to do. Which is, this is an example of, I love the Ev Williams definition of innovation. Ev is the co-founder of Twitter, founder of Medium. He founded Blogger way back when. The guy's had a little bit of a role to play in how we communicate digitally and all over the world today. So Ev says that all innovation is removing steps. So if you line up all the steps people are taking to do something, and then you use technology to either remove a step or make that step easier, quicker, cheaper, more enjoyable, that's innovation. And so in this case, Instagram is innovating not by creating a new way of doing things, but as the article actually addresses, it says no more screenshots. Now you can just upload or syndicate a link from SoundCloud. So they were observing an existing user behavior, and they said this tool is being hacked to do this thing. Right. It's happening often enough where we're going to actually build in the feature, right? So I think there's a little bit of a meta lesson underneath it. It's not what is it to marketers, it's just what does that look like when you actually innovate. It looks like something like this. It's not life-changing, but this is what it means to innovate.
Just makes it simpler for you to be able to do what you need to do, right? Very good. Very good. Very good. Well, over on the Marketing Land side, Amy Gesson-Hughes actually put out an article here real quick. There's a study here. Small businesses are more likely to shift ad budgets from search, display, and paid social to Amazon. Third Door Media's Making Room for Amazon report highlights marketers' plans for Amazon ad budget, staff, and technology. So the article goes on and describes what the budgets are, how the budgets are actually shifting. That survey of nearly 700 digital marketers conducted by Third Door Media, the parent company of Marketing Land, found that 80% of those currently advertising on the e-commerce platform plan to actually increase their Amazon ad investments in 2019. Responders at small businesses were actually more likely to say that they added Amazon spend. The added Amazon spend will come from shifting budgets from other digital channels, such as display advertising and search advertising. Small businesses are more likely to reallocate these spaces, and overall, 55% of respondents said Amazon budgets will be coming from incremental sources as opposed to brand new revenue. So the advertising spend in this we've talked about this before, just shifting the actual investments as opposed to new marketing dollars. What do you guys think about Amazon becoming more and more of a player and taking some of Google's prime real estate?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I'm not sure. I get it, I guess. I mean, I get there's a lot of traffic and there's a lot of people there, but we've seen how many times do we actually click on a display ad? You know, I don't know how much it makes sense for a lot of B2C, unless you're an e-commerce website. I think it makes perfect sense. But you know, like a local plumber or something, I don't know how why would shift money away from a Google search to an Amazon search, unless it's for a voice play that's coming in the future or something. But yeah. I don't know. I'm not a paid ad guy. I've never even played much with Amazon ads, so I'm not real sure how people are even using them or the strategies behind them, or if there's what the different ad types even are. So,
and so it may very well be kind of a gold rush going after positioning yourself in the Amazon search advertising environment, and hopefully get in there where voice search is still trying to figure itself out, so they can position themselves on those first rung searches. Yeah. Jay, what do you think about the Amazon play here? Is shifting funds over?
I get worried about studies like this because of the way they're interpreted, where people are saying, oh, now I have to do that, right? Because search might be working for you, display might be working for you, or maybe it will work for you if you really try to figure it out versus just jump onto the thing everyone says works better or easier.
Right.
I also think that it's it's the height of insanity, especially for a small business, but any business really, to bet on a third-party platform with algorithms you don't control, which is to say any third-party platform. And I don't know how many times we have to live through this, guys. So we lived through it with Facebook as the probably prime example, where brand pages were a big thing. People spent on the technology to create cool games or whatever. I use the word cool in quotes here. And they basically built their audiences on a Facebook page. And then Facebook said, you know, it'd be nice to make money on some of that activity. We're going to charge you to reach more than 1% or less of your actual owned audience. And again, owned is in quotes there because it's on a third-party platform. Then you go over to Medium, and Medium has their paid program. So a lot of the reach for people who just write for free has dwindled. So why host a blog with them instead of a white label solution like WordPress that you actually own the domain? Same thing for YouTube Red. YouTube creators who build their audiences and rely on the YouTube algorithm, they don't make any money when someone says, I don't want the ads on this channel anymore. I'd like to pay YouTube a subscription. Well, now the ad revenue is gone from that creator and they don't get any kind of cut from YouTube Red. We see this over and over again. Every time you bet your fate on a third-party platform, the third-party platform says, thank you so much for your time, attention, money, and customers. We care about our business, not yours, and we're going to prove that over the long haul. So this is a really dangerous precedent. I'm not saying this is happening now. I'm saying this is a slippery slope, and we have to be careful because we've seen history repeat itself over and over again.
No, you're absolutely right. The sheer fact that I've been a huge proponent of keeping it in your own sandbox. AMP was really actually tweaked me, because literally it was a Google grab, and all of a sudden we couldn't control any of the aesthetics, any of the conversion real estate. But you know, in certain aspects, you're going to have to play in their sandbox. You just shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. You shouldn't just jump into one space and then wait for the game to change. That's what you're saying here, is diversify.
It's a portfolio approach. The word diversify is perfect there. I host a podcast series called Exceptions, among other projects, and we talk to the world's best B2B brands who proactively build their brand. They're not just doing old norms of like block and tackle marketing. They believe in brand and customer experience, and that's why they're doing so well today. And to an individual, every CMO, director, VP, frontline marketer we talk to, they're like, yeah, we believe in brand, but we take a portfolio approach. Like everything is a test. This is about constant improvement, constant lifelong learning. We're not saying this is the solution. And again, I worry, especially because it's a study focused on small and medium-sized businesses, I worry that with what little mental capacity they have, because they're split across so many things, right? They're doing hard work and they're very smart people, but marketing to them is a fraction of what they work on typically, or their marketing team is under-resourced, that it's just all they can do to keep up. So, okay, this study says people are shifting budget. I will too. And it's a very dangerous precedent. I think better is to have that portfolio approach and test your way forward. So if you're going to allocate more budget, it's because it's working. You're not going to give over the fate of your whole company to a third party, but you're like, you know what? This is already proven a little bit. We'll add more and more and more, but we're going to keep a well-rounded balance, and we're going to point everybody back to a channel we own ultimately, because otherwise a small tweak in the algorithm and we're sunk.
It's very similar to the last article, is that you just can't jump because everybody says jump, or more importantly, can't jump because somebody's putting some news out there to be interpreted to be able to jump, right? Yeah. So when it comes down to ad spend, I mean, there is certainly a swing over to Amazon from a voice search positioning, and I mean, we're all kind of questioning how the monetization of that's going to work out, because now you're down to one sole ad in there, and it could very well push away the entire consumer base if they don't do it right. So on top of everything else, shifting your coveted, budget into a space that's unproven. I mean, Amazon's proven to so many degrees, and if it's an e-commerce play, so be it. You're going to be able to find a good number of pieces of real estate on Amazon. But the voice search thing, if you're actually putting money in, betting on a voice search play without even statistics being there to be able to guide that, that's a rash decision. Rash. There it is. So I tell you what this rash decision was as well over at Search Engine Journal from Matt Southern. Twitter lost 9 million monthly active users last quarter. That was a rash decision. See what I did there?
Yeah, I did.
Twitter's actually released its latest quarterly report revealing its monthly user count dropped 9 million in Q3. I mean, just the sheer fact that was a user drop. And I mean, that's larger than many countries.
I mean, some of that was it explains later that it was part of Twitter's own doing.
Right.
They've been cleaning up the spam in Twitter for a while now. So he said he even expect a lower number next quarter. So
it's just clean up. Yeah, I was trying to be overly dramatic. You realize that. As the numbers show, they've actually wiped out considerably more accounts than it has actually been adding. But this is kind of the righting of the ship, so to speak, is that you're going to lose a lot of accounts that really were not even active, or they were spam crap out there, right? Yeah. Last year at this time, Twitter reported a 14% growth in daily activities. So I'm comparing and contrast that. So they're doing cleanup. They're taking care of their own sandbox, and hopefully this is part of their resurrection pursuit, because we've all been so disenfranchised and disillusioned that was a space in which we could not only get a message across, but we could also market in that message as well. Jay, your thoughts?
I think the lead here is buried, right? So the sense that you're getting here is that people want clicks.
Yeah.
And so you write a post that's like monthly active users decline. Because if it's Twitter's doing swell, not such a great article, right? Or at least in terms of like gaming systems and getting clicks. So what's more important to Twitter than monthly actives? Daily actives. What's healthy at Twitter right now? It looks like daily actives, right? And Twitter's a company that has long relinquished the control or the proactive nature of like branding yourself and giving your use case to your users. They let the users decide what it is that they've built, sometimes to their benefit, sometimes not. But what we have as users have decided is that Twitter is a daily water cooler. And so we have little niches that we just like sort of like dive into. We have business Twitter, which is a much more wonderful place than sports Twitter. Don't never read the comments of a journalist, especially a female journalist, by the way. It's such terrible behavior on Twitter, which is another big problem of theirs. But you dive into those comments in business. They're trying to be productive, trying to be helpful, even if challenging you. You look at the comments in other little bubbles of Twitter and not so great. But my point is we have all these versions of Twitter and they're all tied to things we care about every single day. So monthly actives really don't matter if you're Twitter. Now, if you're a photo sharing site, sure, maybe. But here, I think it's buried the lead, which is daily active users. The metric they care much more about, the sign of health, has gone up, all the while they've removed these spam or propaganda or bot accounts, right?
So there's causality, actually. I mean,
there's two bits of good news here, right? But good news doesn't sell.
That was a bit of a clickbait headline there.
If you make money on ads, you want impressions, right?
Yep.
The business model is clear on this website.
Yep. Oh, I tell you what is valuable that we don't make any money on, but we want to make sure that you're getting the news is our Edge of the Web newsletter. So we want you to sign up. Just go over to edgeofthewebradio.com right now and be able to sign up for that. Or simply, don't do it while you're driving. Go text to the number 22828, the word Edge Talk, and you can sign up right there. And we're not monetizing this thing. This is altruistic of us, right? We're just putting out nuggets of digital gold.
That's what it is.
Anyway, do that. So, hey, and give us feedback on the newsletter. Let us know how we're doing, and we want to make sure that that we give you the best of the best on a regular basis. So, follow all the featured and trending topics over at edgeofthewebradio.com. But now, let's deep dive with this week's featured guest.
Now it's time for Edge of the Web featured interview with Jay Acunzo, author of the new book, Break the Wheel.
All right, to all of our edgers, I'm going to stop doing that. I got to push away. It's stuck in my mind, man. To all of our listeners who've been with us for a while, you certainly recognize Jay Acunzo. He's been on a show before, had a great time, had a certain series of debates that were
still bugging you, man. It's been
still,
a year. It's literally been like a year and like less than 1 week. 51 weeks ago.
The problem is, you know what the problem is? Marvel keeps on putting out great stuff, and we have Justice League.
You got Aquaman.
That's like a saving grace. But Justice League took a big crap on everything. I don't know what to say, man. I mean, I will concede. How about that? See, he's not even saying anything.
He doesn't have to.
He doesn't. Well, let's tell our audience about Jay. Jay is actually a founder of Unthinkable Media, where he actually makes award-winning podcasts and documentary series with companies like Drift, Flipboard, and Wistia. He's previously worked for ESPN, Google, HubSpot, and NextView Ventures. And his new book, Break the Wheel, is out, where he helps readers do their best work and question best practices. And we kind of entered into this conversation with a couple news stories that were, had the connotations of people that jump into best practices or what they think are best practices. But all things considered, what you're doing is challenging what's supposedly a norm, is that we should all be kind of going in these lemming channels and doing what everybody else is doing as best standards. Jay, first and foremost, let our audience know where you've come from in your own words, and let's get cracking into this book.
I'm a maker at heart. So although I've worked in marketing, the reason I showed up to this industry is someone was like, you can write for a living. And I was like, great, I'll show up tomorrow for work. So I like to make things that make me feel, and most importantly, make other people feel. And I think too often, especially because I focus on B2B topics, career, business, industry, a lot of these pieces of content or shows or books, they don't reflect the emotion that we get in our work. I think we all draw tremendous meaning from our work, whether that's on one end of the spectrum, it's fun and funny and wacky, or it's serious and saccharine, or everything in between. And so that's where I come from. Is I come from an emotional place. Every time I write something, you gave me the bio of where I've worked, but no matter where I've gone, it's always been about how do we instill more in both the enjoyable nature, the deliciousness of what we create to match the nutrition of what we create in the business world. Nutritious and delicious is a phrase I say a lot. How do we do that in our work in content marketing or otherwise? So I try to do that with every show I make, with every blog post, every newsletter, and now with the book.
Very good. So it's a truly, if you haven't heard Jay's podcast and storytelling, you got to dive in there, because it is not a conventional podcast in any way, shape, or form. I mean, there's so much energy and focus that go into, and creativity. I'm not trying to suck up to you. I'm just telling the audience.
You don't have to stop.
Keep going. I know he had that kind of creep face happening there. I was like, okay, Sparks. No, but it's a great podcast, and it actually it is an emblem of what you're talking about here is you got to have passion on what you're doing, producing something good, but also loving what you're doing, right?
100%. People ask if, looking at a productive person, you want to know, how do you structure the day and how do you break down the hours and what tools do you use?
Right.
I honestly think that the most productive people, the most successful, maybe you define that by results, maybe you define that by fulfillment. They have a sense of what they're all about. They have a sense of self-awareness and situational awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they know where they want to go, and then they find joy and intrinsic motivation in the work. And that's definitely like a bit of the sensibility that you'll find in the book. So, one of the major themes, and really the reason I wanted to write this, is we live in this world full of best practices and conventional wisdom and hacks and cheats and tips and tricks and gurus and technological change. And so finding best practices is not the goal. Finding what works best for you is, and we don't talk enough about how to do that, but that's what matters, right? There's a difference between a best practice or a trend or a precedent and what works best for you, your audience, and your resources, your context right now. And I think in this world, the real skill, especially if you're a marketer or an entrepreneur or creator, it's not finding the answers, it's vetting them. It's vetting them as possibilities to make sure whatever you do works best for you. So that's the book. That's why I wanted to write it, is because that's the most important thing at work to me.
But what you're asking for of advertisers and small, medium-sized business owners, you're asking them to have an additional adherence to discipline to really check out, not only be aware of context, but also know what they need to do. And so many marketers haven't taken that step to dive into what's going to work for them. And to your point, best practices can kind of sound like, okay, I'm just going to do the steps of the dance without really even knowing the dance itself or even why I'm doing the dance, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I dug up a few psychological reasons. I wanted to know, why do we make decisions the way we do at work? Why do we glom onto a trend? Why do we revert back to a tried and true precedent or look for a case study? And why do we sometimes devolve into chaos? We talked about putting the tactic before the strategy, the cart before the horse. Why do we make decisions this way? And there are real psychological reasons for it. It's not that we're all lazy. It's not that we're all just trying to cheat the system. One of the reasons that I've encountered is called cultural fluency, which is basically your behavior when the world unfolds as you expect it will. It comes from a guy in Chicago, a researcher named Jim Morey. And he observed that when things are unfolding according to some kind of tradition, we become mindless. So a really easy example is he ran a little clever study, a little test on his friends and family at a barbecue. If this guy ever invites you to a family function, just say no. So he broke up his friends and family into two groups. And right before they took their food on the 4th of July at this picnic, he gave half the group white plates and half festive 4th of July plates. And as he predicted, the group with the 4th of July plates took more food because it's culturally fluent to gorge yourself on the 4th in the United States.
Right?
And then later that year, he did it again on Labor Day. Again, just say no if Jim invites you anywhere. And half the group white plates and half the group, this is Labor Day, gave them Halloween plates.
Ooh.
And that group, with a very out of place ghost and pumpkins on their plate, took less food. So now taken together, he says that this provides at least initial support for this idea that unless a detail is slightly out of place, if we expect it to go that way and it does, we just do the things we always do the way we always do them. Why? Because that's how we do things around here, right? And it's a very simple trick to get out of this mindless flow in anything you're doing. You have to ask better open-ended questions. Because an open-ended question, or what I call in the book a trigger question, it turns you from this expert who has the list of steps and you just go with the flow, to somebody who's more mindful, who's more like an investigator. And now it's like, I'm admitting I don't have the answer. I've asked an open-ended question. The one we always hear about is why. And it's a little bit disconcerting. I introduce what they call cultural disfluency. I separate from that mindless flow, and I now have to think more critically. Just like with the ghosts and pumpkins on the plates. And your mind might not even say, well, this plate is out of place for Labor Day, I'm going to take less food. It might be subconsciously, but suddenly you think more critically about your own situation instead of lapsing into whatever is expected of you. So that's just one example of the few different barriers we have to get over if we're going to make better decisions more tailored to work for us.
That's well said. The concern is that it gets back to my original point, is that it takes discipline to even break that wave that's just rolling over you of cultural unawareness or knowledge of kind of the here and now, to be able to take a step out and say, all right, well, should we really be doing this? Because inside of the business, right, you also have a whole nother hierarchy of I shouldn't rock the boat, or I should be maybe I'll go over here, but I won't push on something that's already been embraced, and a heck of a lot of money and dollars going into this particular digital marketing channel. I mean, what you're really doing is opening up the doors for allowing people to kind of check themselves at any stage of the game, to be able to pay attention to. You just don't do strategy from the beginning and let everything flow. You've got to check back in and be able to have the ability to push the brakes at any point in time during any type of marketing execution. We say that, but I mean, obviously your book goes far beyond the marketing channel, right? So what you're empowering people is to be able to stop and hey, just say, halt, let's have a look at this, right?
There's a type of person this book is for. If you're somebody who wants to put the work on repeat, if you want a silver bullet, if you are okay with the status quo, this book is not for you, because it does require discipline. It requires you to act like an investigator, that lifelong learner who says, you know what, this worked yesterday, but not today. Or this works for their customers, and they're the experts saying it worked for them, and they wrote the blueprint, but we have a different scenario because of our team, or because of our audience, or because of the resources at our disposal compared to them. You know, I don't know anybody who's done great work that doesn't actually say it took work, right? And then you get into the marketing world, and we have this god awful attitude that but that sounds like discipline, that sounds like focus, that sounds like thinking for yourself. How do you get results without doing that? I think it's literally impossible. But the problem is, because we have that attitude, now we're like, oh, that person will teach me to be rich, I'll go run with them. Or, oh, they put hustle on a t-shirt and said I just have to outwork the competition. Okay, I'll do that. We look for God metrics and literally idols, gods and goddesses of the business world that we worship. Or we say, well, I can't, I won't, I'm not, so I'm done, right? So this is not a book for people that want that silver bullet. This is a book for people who want to give the words and the process and maybe the inspiration to a desire they already feel. This vague but burning desire to be better than the norm.
Right.
It's just that we've never explored. There's plenty of knowledge for going 0 to 5, right? Follow these lists of steps from an expert. There's very little attention paid to when how-to is now table stakes, when expertise is commodified. What's the real skill? Self-awareness, situational awareness, building your work to tailor it to your scenario, to the modern context. That's the real skill, right? And yeah, that takes work, but there is no other way. So what I tried to do in the book is provide some mental heuristics to ease the burden a little bit and help people point that effort, that desire to be great in a productive way. It's not about being a rebel. It's about being practical and moving the business or your career forward.
Molly, there's a lot of questions that just from what you just said. I mean, you're asking, I keep on putting it back into the digital marketing realm, right? There's been, we had over the last 3 years such a glut of content. Everybody was writing the 10 top tips to do this, right? And there was so much of that. It was wash, rinse, and repeat that we all got numb, and it was just noise at a point in time. I know exactly. It's what you're talking about is breaking away. Not a rebel, but you have to have a maturity of knowing what you're really saying and what you should be saying, and not just going with the flow. My gosh, can we ask digital marketers to be able to take that big step? Because that is a doozy, as opposed to getting them, baby steps towards cleaning up your content. Now you don't have to write that much. Just write something really, really good.
The doozy part stands out because, so I have this podcast, Unthinkable, which you shouted out. Thank you.
Yeah.
I drew a lot of inspiration and outright stories and material from that show because I've hosted it for a couple of years now and wrote the book starting at the end of last year. And the commonality is all these people I've talked to, they do something that seems crazy from the outside looking in, and it's succeeded. And it's either crazy, oh my gosh, I wish I could do that, or crazy, oh, that'll never work, until you see it work for them. And I always want to explore the divide. What is different about them than us? Well, it turns out all these people, they just make decisions not based on the best practice, not based on the trend, but based on something very logical in their context. They're like, actually, I know this about us as a team, or our customers, or again, our resources, the 3 parts of your context. And in a very logical fashion, they pursued that. So the reason it looks crazy from the outside is we lack context, right? And so that's what I'm trying to get people to do, is to say, hey, look, everyone's talking about short form content as one example, or writing newsletters with link roundups to be a curator. Well, maybe something about you, and this is personal to me, I like to write stories. Maybe I'm more uniquely qualified to write a long form story in a world of short form content for my newsletter because of something I know to be true about myself. Or maybe I've talked to enough listeners or audience members, which I do on video calls, to know that they actually crave that, to supplement all the short form stuff or whatever. It's always about the contextualizing of best practices. So I think if you could summarize the book in a visual, it's again not about being a rebel or saying to your boss you're wrong. What if we could set up like a filter around our brains so that all the endless advice and overwhelm we feel every day has to go through that filter?
There it is.
And make sense of it, right?
Yep.
That would be powerful. That would be the like clarity we lack in so many cases in marketing. So while everyone else can write about tips and tricks or trends or how-tos, I wanted to help us set up that decision-making filter first so that all that information out there, that now serves us. That's the goal.
No. I mean, I keep on hearing in the back of my mind, know thyself. You have to know your business's personality, your business's mission statement, and your business's goals before you can. Same bloody thing we talked about. You can't use a tool until you know what your story is and how you'd even use that tool. You just can't go after something and try to make it fit into your culture, fit into your personality of business. It doesn't make sense to go reaching after things that don't align with your business, right?
100%. One of my favorite stories from the book is a product called Poopery. It's a bathroom spray that you spray on the water, not into the air. And I talked to the CEO, and she's a big believer in this idea of curiosity and lifelong learning and kind of questioning things to make sure you're critiquing and thinking critically about the world around you, not just going with the flow, cultural fluency. And she talks about how, if you really why something to death, or you ask enough questions, you reach what they call a first principle insight, which is like the real thing, say, a customer is after, right? Nobody buys a better pillow. That's an assumption you're making. They buy a better night's sleep. Well, Poopery prevents the odor from getting into the air. Whereas dozens and dozens of products exist for your bathroom experiences, really all they're doing is they're combining a bad smell with a good one, and that just creates a new form of bad smell. Well, Poopery prevents the smell from existing in the first place. Yep. Why? Because that's what you want, right? You actually want, I went to like Febrez's website, and they talk about being in the odor elimination business, but that implies that the odor was there to begin with, and we don't want that. It's too embarrassing. We'd rather admit that it never even happened, right? Poopery knows that. They know their customers. They've investigated their context enough to understand that about us, whereas Febreze is not. So while Febreze is in the odor elimination business, Poopery is in the odor prevention business, because that's what we actually want, right? And so it seems kind of nuts that you're going to spray the water instead of the air until you understand what they investigated. Actually, you can trap the odors underneath. Here's the science that we dug up. Actually, customers really do want to pretend it never happened, not that they actually show somebody or like omit this weird smell, like when they leave the bathroom, that's like flowers and crap, like literally, so there's all these issues with kind of glomming onto precedent that really you can boil it down to, it lacks context. It lacks the variables of your situation. So you have to start with that. And then you can make decisions with a lot more clarity. And Poopery is a really great example. They're now worth over $300 million. And I can't emphasize this enough, selling poo spray.
It's a beautiful thing. Well, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, and the question I have is, how do they come to that conclusion? I mean, not that come to that conclusion. How did they? Was she just wanting to come up with an idea? Like,
no.
She had a different line. She didn't have a different. She was already selling a Febreze style thing. I guess I don't understand that backstory.
She's from the beauty industry, so she understands essential oils, but she's never made a CPG product. In fact, she'd actually sworn off business after a couple bankruptcies around the downturn in the economy. And so one day she was at her brother-in-law's at a party, and the brother-in-law comes out and he was like, Susie, why in the hell has nobody solved this problem? Like, we're all just putting Band-Aids on this problem. And she asked, well, yeah, why? Right. And so she took very seriously this firsthand observation and used that as a springboard to start investigating. Right. And that's a very big hallmark of everybody who does, I think, exceptional work. It's like exceptional work isn't actually created
Mm-hmm.
by answers others give us. I think exceptional work is created by the questions we ask ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. And so these people in the book, and there's a few dozen stories,
Mhm.
they have this hallmark, whether they're Starbucks or they're a tiny coffee shop, where they observe something in the world and they're like, I'm going to take this observation seriously. Right. Something is not right here. I'm actually going to pursue that. Versus what we do when we feel another one of those psychological barriers, learned helplessness,
Mhm.
is we're like, yeah, but they told me that I should go this way, but I'm thinking I should go this way. But what could I know? I'll still go with the expert. I'll still go with the precedent, right? These people took it upon themselves to actually think critically about, maybe this thread is correct. I'm just going to pull it, right? It's like, this is firsthand, that's secondhand. I'm going to go with the firsthand.
I'm beginning to see where you're going in a couple of different veins. One, you're trying to move people away from this concept of breaking the mold, because there's a fear factor there. People that aren't wired to actually go rogue for a particular degree, right? They're going to be they're wired to be in the channel of where everybody else is, right?
Yeah.
So trying to take on a break the mold concept, many people may just push against that and want to be in that space with the rest, right? So what you're giving your audience in the book is some investigative I can't even say it, investigative tools. Wow. And this is where we really want to go, is how can people dig into their inner investigator?
Sure. So in the book, I propose 6 questions. There are 2 types of questions. There's a trigger question and a confirmation question. Trigger question is an open-ended question about your situation. And best of all, like that question, why, it can only be answered with reflection or testing. You can't Google the answer. So you ask a trigger question, and now all of a sudden you're thinking critically. You remove yourself from that cultural fluency, that mindlessness. And the confirmation question serves to confirm that your investigation is heading in the right direction. So I'll give you an example.
Yep.
When we talk about the biggest variable of our context, us, the people doing the work, right? You don't exist in any other scenario. That should be taken into account when we tailor our approach, right? Because maybe, like on my example before, maybe you're storytelling as a writer instead of a how-to tips and tricks writer. So you can do long form instead of short form, whatever the case. There are 2 questions you can ask about yourself. The first is, what is my aspirational anchor? Which is essentially a type of goal that focuses you on the behavior change instead of the mile marker. So an aspirational anchor basically combines your intent for the future, that mile marker. So, I'd like to be part of the conversation on social or in my industry. And then it adds in what goals miss, which is some kind of dissatisfaction you have with your current course there, right? So maybe it's, I want to be part of the conversation, but my tone of voice is too bland, or I'm not actually using my authentic tone of voice. I'm trying to sound corporate, right? And so out comes an aspirational statement like, let's show the world how fun and relevant our business really is. Right. And that focuses the team and yourself on trying new things, on exploring something new. It launches that investigation because that's a trigger question. What is my aspirational anchor? And now I'm focusing on the behavior change. So maybe in a boring industry, we're going to try to be more sarcastic because that's who we are as people. You don't want to throw out the old playbook and go running away from it. You're not a rebel. You have results, you have finite resources, you have stakeholders. So ask a confirmation question, right? Which is, what is our unfair advantage? We're going to show the world how fun and relevant we are. Well, why us? What is it about us that we do all the time that's natural for us, that our boss sees is clearly something we have to offer or our clients and customers? Like, what is it about us? What is our unfair advantage for reaching that aspiration? And so what I do in the book is I work through stories about self-awareness, asking questions about us, and about situational awareness, asking questions about our audience and our resources. And then I break those down into these 6 fundamental questions, 2 of which I just gave you, where now you can start to think critically without saying, to hell with the old way, we're going that way, right? Because that's foolish. That actually might not even work. Say nothing of your own sensibilities or willingness to try that. So if we start asking these questions, a trigger question and a confirmation question, we cease acting like experts who know things in theory, and we start acting like investigators who look for firsthand evidence, essentially, that you should head in that direction.
So you're developing a method, but I keep on harkening back that this is much more embraceable, for lack of a better word, to actually learn these particular techniques and become more self-aware as a company as well as an individual, as opposed to trying to break the mold without any other guidance. It's just we have to do something different. This actually gives you a discipline to mine yourself and give you a structure in which you can actually challenge each and every one of those questions, right?
Right. It's contextualized thinking,
There
right?
it
It's
is.
tailoring your actions and your decisions for what would work for you, which we all get on board with. Like we all agree that we want to do our best work. So why is there so much average stuff out there? Why is there a lot of commodity content or rote tasks that we're doing?
Right.
Well, it's because we believe that to do our best work, we need best practices, we need trends, we need the case study, right? And again, that misses variables of our situation. So what if we add that back in? It's back to that mental filter I'd like people to set up to vet the possibilities instead of just cling to them. And if we do that, we're serving the same goal that the critical boss has, or that the client who prefers the tried and true has, which is, look, we're in this together to go way over there and get our best result.
Right.
Like we're now having to take practical steps to reorient our decisions towards doing that, right? So let's focus on the practical steps instead of this kind of navel gaze that we go through of like, should you be a rebel? Should you be different instead of better, right? Like we get stuck in theory.
Yep.
And although this book talks about ideas like intuition and creativity, this is very much a practical tool. I call it, it's like, this is a sledgehammer I want to hand you so you can start swinging against this endless wheel of commodity work.
There it is. You gave us in the book 3 psychological barriers to recognize, because I think what you're really doing. I mean, I'm all over the place with analogies, but you're also kind of unplugging people from the matrix. Is that now what they were used to and their supposed structure of how to do business, right? You start unplugging, and now you have to give yourself some structure of how to not only process yourself and how to be more culturally aware, but also you got to recognize as you come across a barrier that you're wired for because you've been plugged into the matrix so long. You have to recognize those blocks that you have because they have been conditionalized for such a long time. So we talked about the cultural fluency or the anemic side of cultural fluency and not knowing what's really happening contextually. What are the other 2 areas of those barriers that we should be aware of?
Right. So these are the psychological reasons, the science behind why we make decisions the way we do. So cultural fluency, we rely on the tried and true, right? That's like we're going to cling to the conventional wisdom. The other is pretty similar to, like, the result is pretty similar in that we rely on the convention or we beat something to death. Right? I think a marketer is very guilty of this. Oftentimes we find something that works or someone says this works and we beat it to death. We just keep doing it. We ruin it. And so this is a result of something called the foraging choice. So this is a new study out of NYU published this year, which talks about how very many decisions we make in life and in the workplace resemble an animal foraging, in that we have to weigh the benefits and the decision between exploiting our existing position or exploring other possibilities, right? So that word exploiting really does hit home for a lot of marketers and teams because we tend to do that. And what the study found is that, predictably, when you introduce chronic and or acute stress to our decision-making process, we tend to cling more fervently to existing positions. In other words, we go into exploitation mode instead of exploring new possibilities. So I like to make fun of all the hucksters who spam you on LinkedIn and they care about the algorithm more than they care about authentic engagement. But, I'm starting to consider that maybe 1% of those people do care, but maybe they're just so stressed about all these algorithm changes or the results that are placed on their head each month that they're doing anything they can to just try and exploit something that somebody said works, because there's a certainty to that. It's a known position versus exploring something new. And I mentioned this idea of an aspirational anchor and using your unfair advantage to reaching that. Those are the types of questions you ask in order to go exploring. Because if you're doing this way and you're like, we have a goal, X% growth, you'll keep exploiting. Because you're like, I'm so stressed about that goal, I'll do anything. It incentivizes at all costs behavior. But if you say, this is the behavior change we need to do our best work, it's our aspirational anchor, intent for the future, and the dissatisfaction we have with our current approach to reach that future. Now, you're like, all right, well, writing a blog, my voice is too bland. I got to go. I got to go exploring. I don't know what the answer is, but I got to go test something new, or I got to go research. I got to go experiment. So the idea of the foraging choice hit home for me because as a digital marketer, as a content marketer, my whole career, a podcaster, there's a very long list of things that people say to try to do that
Right.
sound like cheats and hacks, right? And it's because of stress that we do that. So we need to make better foraging choices to stop exploiting an existing system.
Well, it's very natural because it's very animalistic, is that if you're under stress, you're going to go to what you know, and you're not going to want to explore. You're not going to want to test something out for fear that you may actually lose your job, right? But at the same time, go with what you know, and be damned if you don't break your routine. I mean, unfortunately, I was investigating something here the last couple of weeks, cognitive dissonance. I'm sure you're aware of this mindset that you can persuade yourself into making two choices, and the further and further that you stay with one choice, you're compounding, you're reinforcing that, because you do not want to even investigate what it could have been, what you could have done in a different direction. So this finds its way right there. It's not only the tried and true, but you also, because your pride factor is there, yes, we chose this, and we're going to keep on this because we chose it, as opposed to scrutinizing the true effect and then looking at other ways to test things, or other options, right? So, I mean, we're also kind of wired to believe in our original choices and stay with them.
Yeah, the father of modern improv comedy is Del Close, and he talked to his students, Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, very famous comedians, about following the fear, right? He would push them to follow the fear. Now, it makes sense if you're a performer, that's a nice idea.
Sure.
Obviously, at work, that's harder to get on board with, but the point is well taken, and I think well applied by really exceptional companies and teams today, which is if you don't know what's actually going to work better than today, you cling to what you're doing today.
Yeah.
And that's a problem because you stagnate. So whereas cultural fluency is about looking backwards and sort of trying to bring back what worked before, if you fall victim to this poor foraging choice and exploit, it really leads to stagnant work. And it becomes this game of like, okay, I'm exploiting until this doesn't work anymore, then I'm jumping to the next thing. And so I think self-awareness helps you with that. You need to motivate your teams to actually think about a behavior change that will help you explore, not just like, here's a goal, do anything in your power to reach it, because that creates stressful decision making.
Yeah, it really does. The third barrier that we want to recognize in the book, give us a breakdown of what that is.
Sure. It's called Pike syndrome, which is an odd name. So I can explain the story behind Pike syndrome. Basically, there was an experiment that used to be run by scientists that it was a pike in an aquarium, and they would start dropping minnows into that aquarium, and predictably the pike would eat them. But then they lowered the minnows in surrounded by glass, and the pike couldn't see the glass. So he just started smashing up against it in pursuit of his prey. And it turns out he would do this for an hour or more and literally conditioned himself not to hunt minnows, because when you removed the glass after that period of time, those minnows could swim all around the tank and the pike wouldn't chase them.
Oh, wow.
And so this explains a concept called learned helplessness, which is this like feeling of powerlessness after repeated failure. And it could be sharp and stark and obvious. Like we kept trying to get a podcast going and it kept failing.
Right.
Or it could just be this existential dread we all feel, this stress, this pressure every day. But whatever the case, we decide that there's a right and a wrong answer, and clearly we don't have the right answer, so that's no longer viable. So we go seeking our answers out there, right? And just like the pike had tasty little morsels swimming in front of him, I think we have tasty little details swimming in front of us all the time, little bits of information that we need to use. Again, this idea of a firsthand observation inspiring the CEO of Poopery, instead of relying on the secondhand observation that this is how it's done. Right. And those little details really do matter. They can be subtle, but they can make all the difference in the world. And so to unlearn this idea of learned helplessness, this third barrier, we can identify a better insight about the audience or customer. In other words, if we're overwhelmed, there's so many right answers out there. What could I possibly know? We stop trying to come up with the answers ourselves, and we let not an expert, but the customer be the guide. And that to me is the hallmark of a good investigator. Is you're like, well, yeah, everyone does it this way, but for our audience, this actually works. And so there's a few examples in the book, but I can stick with Poopery. When she first started creating this product, she made it really whimsical and funny. There's a lot of like Monty Python-esque humor around them because she had to break down this like cultural barrier that people don't want to talk about their bathroom situation.
Yep.
how do you educate a consumer about a product they don't know how to use around a topic they don't want to discuss? Big personality, use humor.
You better
right?
believe it.
So that got her to that fundamental insight, like, oh, they actually do want this product. It's just that they weren't willing to talk about it because of the subject matter. And the more she pressed, the more she realized they want to prevent the odor, not eliminate it. Right. So that's a first principle insight. And that was her guide forward. Even though everyone built a product and company this way, she went that way because the customer was the guide.
That's how a squatty potty got into my restroom.
Exactly.
I mean,
we can do a whole book on just bathroom-based brand.
Bathroom marketing, that's where it's at. Okay, so this learned helplessness, it's not only internal of all these things failed, so we'll never go back to them. It's also external, right? It's also learned helplessness from other brands and other marketers, or what we read that this doesn't work, right? So you can conditionalize yourself before you even try something.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I mean, we're taught in school there's a right and a wrong answer. And I find it bizarre that when we leave school, maybe this is a problem with the education system, but when we leave school, we approach very complex and creative tasks in our career with the same mentality. Like, how long should a podcast episode be? That's a symptom that you're feeling some learned helplessness when you ask that question, because you want the right answer. But here are all these variables I can give you that suggest that I can't actually give you the answer. You need to go investigate that yourself, because you might be able to pull off a 7-minute episode, and that's as far as you can go. I might be able to do 45. There are podcasts with 2-hour episodes in the top of the charts. So we have this idea that there's a right and a wrong answer. And I think maybe this learned helplessness does come from education, unfortunately.
That is the case. So, I mean, all things being equal, if you're looking at anything that anybody's doing internally of your own corporation or whatever you're doing, go back through and look at what you've done in the past and break that internal mold, because you're continually conditioning yourself away from potentially winning decisions. What is one of the best practices that you wish people would throw out?
You know what? I can't say one, because the point here is that any of them might work for you.
Right.
But what matters is that you do it in a way that works for you. So I think, let me give you one that I think people are bastardizing way too much. There's this idea today that the DMs, the private messages, the messaging services are where good business development can happen. So we're seeing the rise of a lot of people that are mostly acting like hucksters and spammers. They're using this excuse that, like, well, I can DM a ton of people. I can annoy the many to convert the few, right? Because everybody's opening their messages today, not like email and not like social. They're checking them at a very high rate, because it's where human to human, friend to friend, peer to peer relationships happen. And so now that brands and marketers are poking into both DMs and messaging, they're starting to do that exploitation idea from the foraging choice. They're starting to, look at an expert who's like, just jump into the DMs. That's where business development happens, et cetera. And they're really ruining it. And as a result, they're ruining their reputations. They're ruining the idea that other marketers who might do it well have a chance, because now it's like, I'm going to wholesale write it off, right? I'm just going to ignore any brand, any individual I don't know, asking to connect on LinkedIn, because as soon as I hit connect, they try to sell me something right away. It's like, that's an idea of this like best practice gone awry. But at the same time, there are brands out there that might be able to do that well. And when I say brands, I mean people that might be able to do that well in their specific context because of who they are and how they approach it and what their audience wants, right? This is the pattern behind everything in the book. It's always, it depends. And the ability to answer whether or not it makes sense for you, the ability to answer that it depends conundrum, that is the premium skill for digital marketers today.
I think it's funny because I got a LinkedIn DM right before we started the show, so I thought.
I'm getting put off by those so much. No, you're absolutely right. Jay, I want to wrap up, and I certainly appreciate these nuggets of gold here. I want to wrap up with one thing that I think could be very well the most fearful thing for marketers to embrace whenever they're making decisions, and that's intuition. From going with your gut, right, and trusting yourself to be able to say, you know what, again, following the structure of this is how we can find our mission or our particular message, but the intuition factor, that's where marketers fear to tread, because you put yourself right there in the middle and sticking your neck out. What do you say about intuition in your book?
we go through this journey through history to discover how that phrase and the idea behind it has been bastardized over the years from pop science. And then we dig up some real science, and the real science is much more encouraging. If you look at someone who trusts their gut, I think all they're doing is they're reasoning from first principles more quickly. So like we consider somebody a visionary because they trust their gut and they build something special. I think a true visionary does not see the future. They see the present more clearly than most. In other words, like if you consider that the real ability they have is to consider things, now you can start to do that too. And it might be slower for you, but it gets faster over time until it looks instant. So where we conclude our journey, to give you a little bit of a spoiler if you haven't read the book, is the root of the word intuition comes from Latin, meaning to consider. That's it, to consider. So we have this internal skill, which is to consider our environment. And people who have been using that intuition and asking good questions and investigating their context, they make it look instant. But for us, it might be a slow process. And that's what I gave the questions to people for. It's like, okay, I might have to pause and go through each of these questions, but in the future, maybe I'll go through them more rapidly, or maybe I'll already know that for the next time, or maybe I can just come up with my own questions that suit my own, whatever the case. It's like honing your ability to think critically and think for yourself is not a radical idea. It's not a lofty idea. It's not the muse visiting you. It's a practical skill. And the problem is we haven't given language to that skill. And the closest we've come is intuition, but that's easy to write off as fluff, or it's easy to be too passionate about it as an idea, like I am as a creator. So again, that's part of the book, is let's make it practical. Let's actually turn decision-making and thinking for yourself into a process we can run and tailor and tweak. And that's why the methodology is questions, not steps, because it's going to look different for everybody. So I think the power of intuition is the power to consider your context more critically. In other words, like honestly, in this world of conventional thinking, it's the process of thinking for yourself.
Yeah, intuition. You're restructuring it so we can actually take a look at it, and how it's a discipline. It's a practice you got to get into. And there's so many times that people feel that they don't have that quality. Well, it's literally just like you say, asking questions and being able to practice this regularly for yourself. It's nothing that we're not that. It's something. It's a skill that we all have. Just certain people have it more actively practiced, right?
It's practiced. Exactly. I'd like people to start swinging this sledgehammer, not just pick it up and look at it, but start using this over and over again, because you've developed that muscle.
I dig it. Well, we certainly want our listeners to jump in and grab a hold of this sledgehammer. So where can they actually buy the book?
So Break the Wheel, it's available in Amazon, in audio, in ebook, and in print.
Cool.
Or if you want a little more context, including some of the quotes from people, comments from readers, and I also published my Spotify playlists that I used to write the book.
Oh, sweet.
All that is on jacunzo.com/book.
Very good. So on the screen, we'll have that on there at jacunzo.com/book. We certainly will put everything in the show notes so our listeners can jump in there and take a swing themselves. Jay, we always ask this of our guests, and we certainly want to come back around to you. What bugs you about your industry right now?
Oh man, I mean, I basically wrote a book because I'm so bugged by my industry, right? Like that's the impetus for the book. Yep. I really do think there's so much untapped potential for marketers today, right? So many people don't realize their full potential because they are copying a peer or relying on a trend or past precedent. It's just, at the core of why I wanted to write this book is we all aspire to be exceptional.
Yep.
And yet we all make decisions that imply we want to be average or that we want to create commodity work. And I know that's not true, right? So that just bugs me to no end. And so rather than just have it be the answer on a very great show, I wanted to make it a 40-page journey, uncover that stuff, and also let loose a little bit on that problem.
Absolutely. Well, we certainly appreciate that. And you're absolutely right, is that we're conditioned. And we got to break out of that and really mine ourselves and ask those very, very focused questions, because that's where inspiration lies, and that's what uniqueness from a marketing standpoint or just communication comes from. We applaud you for the book, man. It's a rarity that you see. There's a lot of great marketing authors, but these things what I'm starting to see are these authors such as yourself are extracting learned principles in one vein in one particular industry, and they're applicable to everything in life. And I mean, honestly, I'm sure this was a great journey for you just writing the book, but this can help people in a lot of different ways, don't you think?
I do believe that. I think the way I describe this book is it's a complement to all the other knowledge-based or trend-based books out there.
Yeah.
None of which I'm going to write off as terrible. I mean, some might be, but like I can't make a claim that you shouldn't read them. They're useful, right? Mm-hmm. To varying degrees. It depends, right? So if you start with this book and mix it in with all that other stuff, blog post, podcast, video series included, again, now hopefully you can go back to work and do the real important stuff, which is do great work.
There it is, and know thyself, right? Very good. Well, Jay, we thank you for your time today, and we certainly wish you all the best of luck. We certainly want our listeners to go check out Jay at Acunzo on Twitter at Acunzo, as well as LinkedIn and Instagram, and certainly go over to Break the Wheel that's jacunzo.com/book, right?
jacunzo.com/book or on Amazon. Yep.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for being part of our show. And hopefully we'll swing back around and you'll have another book in 6 months to a year, right?
No? Sounds good. I need to rest up for that. I'll get back to you.
Excellent. This was your first book, so that was a hell of an achievement. Any recommendations, finally, for aspiring authors that want to jump in and do self-publishing?
If you want to write, I mean, the most important thing you do is start writing a manuscript. Mm-hmm. Nothing bad, nothing worse will happen if you have a manuscript, right? So maybe you'll publish it, maybe you won't. Maybe you'll have tons of blog content, or maybe you'll just improve your skill. Mm-hmm. The most important thing to do is stop researching, stop wondering, and just start. Nothing bad happens from action. Start.
Oh, there it is. All right. Well, thanks again, Jay. Thanks for listening to Edge of the Web Radio. Special thank you to our colleagues at Site Strategics, as well as especially our guest, Jay Acunzo. Make sure to check out all the must-see videos and audio and all the insider information over at edgeofthewebradio.com. Be sure to jump in and be a newsletter subscriber. And you know what? Let us know how we're doing. Please rate and review on all the different platforms, or the one that we're on for you. We'd love to have that feedback, and let us know how we're doing. Who are we talking to this week? We actually have another show
on Thursday. We're talking to Mark Irvine from WordStream about social influence on search marketing.
Oh, very good. Very good. All right. So we're going to stay tuned another week. This week, we're going to have another show, and then we're swinging back around. And I don't even know who we're talking to next week, but you do. So from all of us over here at Site Strategics and Edge of the Web, thanks so much for listening, and do not be a piece of cyber driftwood. Talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.